If you enjoy this video, please consider making a donation to patreon.com/JordanOwen42. I want to begin by saying that unlike many of the people whose views I have debunked here in the past, Ben Shapiro is someone I respect and someone with whom I am often in agreement. I agree with him about many economic matters, I agree with him that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a joke, and I respect him in the way that he confronts ideological opponents, even if, like many, I was disappointed by his performance on the BBC. But I part ways with Ben Shapiro rather sharply on the matter of abortion. I am pro-choice and he is pro-life. It is with this in mind that I set about my first deconstruction video of someone who I actually like. I bring this up because I want to clarify that this is not something I relish, even if I do go into my usually snarky tone at times. I would like to think that someone as bright and insightful as Ben could have a more informed view on the matter. Failing that, however, I would like to simply point out that it is on the topic of abortion that Ben falls into one of the pitfalls from which he accuses persons on the left of operating, namely making purely emotional arguments that are devoid of reason or factual analysis. Without further ado, let's begin.
Now this one, this is the thing I really hate. Here's Olivia Wilde, who's the actress most famous from being in House, and here she is talking about why she is in favor of abortion. This is one of the more disgusting videos I've ever seen.
This election cycle, I'm thinking a lot about reproductive rights. Everyone's right to plan when they want to have a family. And it's on my mind because I'm literally about to have a baby, like in a minute, to be able to decide exactly how.
Okay, so she says that she's thinking about reproductive rights 1 minute from having a baby. This is about as perverse a notion as I could possibly imagine. That as you're about to have your child, you're thinking, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could still kill this thing?
That is not what she said. All she said was that the issue of reproductive choice as it affects women on the whole was on her mind because she was about to give birth. She gave no indication that she was contemplating having a late-term abortion or relishing the thought of being able to kill a baby. This sort of wild extrapolation is going to define Ben's argumentation in this video.
It's really imperative that I be able to still kill this thing. You know, here I am. Look how pregnant I am. There's a baby in here. This is my beautiful child. And I was thinking, maybe I should just kill it. You know, it's really important that women be able to kill it anytime they please. She continues along these lines, not, of course, understanding really what she's saying on a moral level.
So here he admits that what he's arguing with is not what she's literally saying, but the implication of what she's saying. Therefore, we have to determine if he's reading into what she's saying correctly. Is she simply saying that women ought to have the right to make decisions about when they want to start a family, including abortion, or is she relishing the thought of being able to exert domineering force over the life of an innocent child? Let's see which direction Ben goes with this.
How and when and why and where I want to have a baby. And I believe that is a basic human right. I care about reproductive rights. What do you care about? If you care about your future, vote for it.
Okay, what I care about is not killing babies. And this is going to be mildly graphic, but this is important because I'm sick of the euphemisms, okay? It's not aborting a fetus. It's not getting rid of a ball of tissue. Okay.
This is a common tactic that Ben uses, and I've seen it come up in his lectures and debate sessions on the topic. He accuses the left of using terms like pro-choice as euphemisms to dodge the reality of what they're doing, i.e. the wanton destruction of innocent human life. The reality is that pro-life is a euphemism as well. Pro-lifers focus on the life of the fetus as a means to dodge the reality that what they are advocating is the slavery and indentured servitude of women forced to bear the burden of pregnancy. When forced to argue their position with that observation on the table, so-called pro-lifers are usually forced to resort to purely emotional arguments and reveal themselves to have, as the pro-choice Ayn Rand would have put it, to have no sense of life. This means that what they are protecting is not life in the human sense, but merely biological existence. The same is true when pro-lifers attempt to protect the life of someone like Terri Schiavo, a woman who had been in a vegetable state for over a decade when she was finally taken off life support. They care about protecting life at the organic level, but not the quality of life the person is experiencing. It comes down to a crucial distinction between the right and the left. The right, as Jordan Peterson has observed, sees things in a very rigid, structured mindset, while the left sees things in terms of more abstract degrees. As such, we can begin to see why people on the right so rabidly protect biological existence. in their minds, if this specific category has been checked off on the to-do list, then one's moral obligations in this matter are fully and righteously fulfilled. The pro-choice side, on the other hand, sees degrees of life and quality of life. It takes into account the desires of the mother, the quality of life she can provide for the child, and the larger spectrum of health and biological concerns that the child may have to contend with. Cue pro-lifers screeching about eugenics. So, in summary, Ben, don't pretend that your side is not also using euphemistic language when it describes forcing a woman to carry a pregnancy to term against her will. Forcing her to perform labor against her will is slavery.
Okay, this what I'm about to show you right now is a picture of a baby. Okay, this is a baby it was a picture of a baby that was aborted by Kermit Gosnell. Okay, this is the Gosnell was somebody who was not covered by the media in any way, shape, or form. He was the most prolific serial killer probably in American history.
We'll talk about the specifics of Kermit Gosnell in a moment, but he was not a serial killer. He was a thoroughly incompetent and ethically bereft abortion provider who faced severe legal penalties for his actions. But an abortion provider is not a serial killer because a serial killer, according to Sagan's medical dictionary, commits murder, abortion is not murder legally speaking, with the intent of deriving psychological gratification.
And this was a baby girl aborted by Kermit Gosnell, and the only question was whether it was legal for him to kill this baby or not. And the only question there was how old was the baby, and was the abortion done inside the womb or outside the womb? Okay, so this baby, I believe, was after the 24-week cutoff, but not by much. So this baby is let's see how old this baby is. This is a case where an abortion went awry. She went to a hospital, and the baby ended up dying at the hospital.
So, to talk in greater detail about Kermit Gosnell, he was admittedly a wholly incompetent abortion provider, and obviously his actions went well outside the boundaries of ethical practice. Here is a quote from the report when Gosnell's clinic was raided in 2010. Quote, "When team members entered the clinic, they were appalled, describing it to the grand jury as filthy, deplorable, disgusting, very unsanitary, very outdated, horrendous, and by far the worst that these experienced investigators had ever encountered. There was blood on the floor, a stench of urine filled the air, a flea-infested cat was wandering through the facility, and there were cat feces on the stairs. Semi-conscious women scheduled for abortions were moaning in the waiting room or the recovery room, where they sat on dirty recliners covered with blood-stained blankets. All the women had been sedated by unlicensed staff long before Gosnell arrived at the clinic, and staff members could not accurately state what medications or dosages they had administered to the waiting patients. Many of the medications in inventory were past their expiration dates. Surgical procedure rooms were filthy and unsanitary, resembling a bad gas station restroom. Instruments were not sterile. Equipment was rusty and outdated. Oxygen equipment was covered with dust and had not been inspected. The same corroded suction tubing used for abortions was the only tubing available for oral airways if assistance for breathing was needed. Fetal remains were haphazardly stored throughout the clinic in bags, milk jugs, orange juice cartons, and even in cat food containers. Gosnell admitted to Detective Wood that at least 10 to 20% were probably older than 24 weeks, the legal limit. In some instances, surgical incisions had been made at the base of the fetal skulls. The investigators found a row of jars containing just the severed feet of fetuses. In the basement, they discovered medical waste piled high. The intact 19-week fetus delivered by Miss Mongar 3 months earlier was in a freezer. In all, the remains of 45 fetuses were recovered. At least 2 of them, and probably 3, had been viable." Close quote. The long-term result of this kind of horrendous behavior is that Gosnell was eventually convicted of providing numerous late-term abortions that violated state law and is currently serving life in prison with no hope for parole. Make no mistake, I wholeheartedly agree that he deserves to be there. Ben's citing of Gosnell, however, is deeply problematic. Again, Gosnell is a favorite example of his to cite, and I've seen him do it elsewhere many times. Something else I've seen him do is respond to the question of abortion in cases of rape and incest by saying that he doesn't feel it's appropriate to use extremely rare cases to determine precedent for the larger whole. By the same token, I would similarly argue that Ben's constant citing of Kermit Gosnell, an extremely rare case, is similarly trying to paint a false picture of the nature of abortion and reproductive choice as some horrifying mad scientist hellscape that incurs an emotional reaction rather than a reasoned one. As Ben is so fond of saying, facts don't care about your feelings, okay, folks?
By 24 weeks, most babies born prematurely will survive. This is a late-term abortion, okay? This is what her baby looks like in the womb. We can see that picture again. That's what that baby looks like. This is a less graphic picture of what an abortion looks like. Okay, a more graphic picture of what abortion looks like involves the snipping off of the crushing of the skull, the sucking out of the brains. It involves, and these are fully formed children. These are fully formed children. I have 2 beautiful children. The idea that you get to murder a kid. Okay, no one has a right to choose that picture. Go back to the other one. No one has a right to choose this. No one. No one has a right to choose this. You don't have a right to choose this, okay?
Everything Ben just described has to do with late-term abortion. Most abortions are performed before 9 weeks, and at 9 weeks the fetus is, according to thebump.com, about the size of a cherry. Removing it does not carry with it the grotesque procedures Ben just described. Now, don't get me wrong, even the removal at that stage can be described in a disgusting manner. But so can pretty much all medical procedures. Try watching a video of a cataract removal sometime. Ben is not arguing logically. He's using an extreme example of someone who performed an abortion procedure that was already illegal at the time it was performed, and using that to undercut your ability to consider the matter in a rational, level-headed manner. But more importantly, in whitewashing the issue by saying you do not have the right to choose this, Ben is ignoring the reality of why women do sometimes choose late-term abortion. To this end, I want to read you a short op-ed by Kelly Cervantes that appeared in Cosmopolitan.com in 2016. Dear Cosmo reader, I do not regret my choice, but that doesn't mean my experience has been easy. I began writing about it as a sort of therapy. Then I started hearing about state after state proposing 18 or 20-week abortion bans, and candidate after candidate supporting them, and I felt compelled to take my private experience public. In September of 2014, my husband and I went to see my OBGYN for our 20-week anatomy ultrasound. The report came back with concerning results, said our doctor, who recommended we get a second opinion from a maternal fetal expert. That appointment, the following day, was the longest hour of my 32-year life. Finally, we learned our baby had a skeletal disorder called thanatophoric dysplasia, which causes underdeveloped lungs, among other ailments. The name translates from Greek to death-bearing abnormal formation. Gravely, she told us that if our baby survived birth, he would die soon after. We made a choice we would not have imagined before the 20-week exam, a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. To close family and friends, we admitted to terminating the pregnancy. To everyone else, we vaguely said we had lost the baby, but the truth in plain English is that I had an abortion. Many severe heart and chromosomal defects cannot be detected until 20 weeks post-conception. It then takes time to schedule tests and consults and to find a doctor to perform the procedure. Suddenly, you are well past the proposed 20-week deadline. I am fortunate to live in New Jersey, a state where abortion after 20 weeks is both a legal and accessible option. But I am from Nebraska, a state where it is not. My experience getting a D&E at 21 weeks was more emotionally painful than anything I had gone through before, but it was far less than what must be felt by women in 13 states where these laws exist. Proponents of these bills claim they are saving the fetus from pain, but most scientists and medical boards, too many to list here, say that's untrue. If it takes a majority vote to pass a bill, shouldn't that vote be based on research conclusions agreed upon by a majority of experts? I doubt my baby felt pain when he died, but I know he would have felt immense pain at birth, death immediately thereafter. And what about the pain and depression I would have felt when someone commented on my swollen belly? How would that have affected my marriage or my then 2-year-old son? Family is incredibly important to me. I've since conceived again and given birth to a beautiful baby girl. When I found out I was having a girl, it spurred my desire to fight for women's rights more. I am terrified that my daughter might someday face the same situation I did, yet won't have the same options available to her. Think about this number, 1.3. That's the percentage of all abortions performed in the United States that occur after 20 weeks. So who are these politicians trying to save? Because they couldn't have saved my baby. It's a crazy important election year. There's an opening on the Supreme Court which constitutionally should be filled by a nominee from our current president. But the next president will likely choose justices during his or her tenure as well. Those justices decide our reproductive rights. They're hearing arguments on clinic restrictions in Texas right now. Before you snag your I voted sticker, please think of me. Let your representatives know that it is not their right to choose a fetus which wouldn't have survived over a family who may have never recovered. Yours, Kelly Cervantes, age 33. Close quote. This is the reality of late-term abortion that Ben is attempting to gloss over. So to you hand-wringing concernocrats out there, I ask you this. How do you justify forcing Kelly Cervantes to carry to term a pregnancy that is inevitably going to result in a dead baby moments after birth? I asked this question privately to friends, and one pro-life friend pointed out that she knew a couple who carried a pregnancy to term knowing that it would die shortly thereafter, and they still cherished their few minutes that they got to spend with their baby. I understand that feeling. I empathize with it. I do. I will even say that were I to find myself in that situation, it is something that I would strongly consider. And if that's the choice you want to make, then choose it. I will not take that choice away from you. I also won't hold a woman in contempt for, as Miss Cervantes describes, not wanting to go through months of people congratulating her on her imminently giving birth, all the while knowing the grim future for that child. I also won't hold her in contempt for not wanting her child to have to die a slow, painful death shortly after being born, or for her not wanting to have to suffer the trauma of going through the great personal physical pain and exertion of giving birth, one of the most extreme pains a human being can endure and one from which all men are exempt, only to watch the result of that labor die right in front of her. Ben will not take these instances into consideration except when he is confronted with them directly. In Q&A sessions, I have heard him say, for example, that it is acceptable for a woman with cancer to receive treatment even if that treatment results in the death of her unborn baby. He will acknowledge reasonable degrees of subtlety in this debate when he is presented with them, which makes his propagandizing in broad strokes all the more deplorable.
Okay, that's a baby. You don't get to kill it just because it's convenient to you. You don't have a right to say, it's my decision where and when and how to have the baby. That's an individual human being, and if that baby were outside the womb and you stuck a knife through its chest, you'd be charged with first-degree murder. You kill it in the womb, and we call it a human right. That's not a human right because that's a human, and that human doesn't have any rights because you just decided its rights are less important than your right to your own convenience.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Ben has not established that women are getting late-term abortions on a whim as he ludicrously and incorrectly extrapolated from the Olivia Wilde video. He is battling a straw man here and nothing more. I thought about trying to find examples of women who randomly and callously decided to terminate their late-term pregnancies on a whim and whose decisions reflected the kind of catty dismissiveness of human life that Ben is describing, but no. The onus is on him to back up his position, and he refuses to do it. And this is why I wanted to clarify at the beginning of this video that Ben Shapiro is someone for whom I have respect on other matters. He is, unlike most pro-life advocates, an intellectual and someone who appears to have a genuine interest in debate and in reaching higher, more rational ground. And unlike glorified insult comics like Ann Coulter, he seems to be a class act that treats himself and his opponents with a certain level of respect and dignity. That's why it's especially galling when, on the subject of abortion, he throws all that out the window and becomes a petulant, whiny, but my feelings millennial.
Despicable. And so we're now going to play a game with the left. Let's play a little game with the left. The game goes like this, okay? Show the other image. The game goes like this. At which point should you be able to kill this baby? Okay, we're going to play a game called When Should You Be Able to Kill This Baby? Because I've been told by people like Hillary Clinton that you're able to kill this baby all the way up to the very end, right? 32 to 30 weeks. right? And that's when the baby is fully formed. It can be born alive. It is a fully formed human being. I've watched 2 of them come out of my wife. These are human beings. These are not balls of tissue. These are not clusters of cells. And I'm sick of being told that it's just an abortion. I don't like the euphemisms. It's not a termination of a pregnancy. It's a termination of a human life. Okay, it's a murder of a human being when you're talking about these babies and this idea that you get to choose that. Look, you got to choose a lot of things in life. You don't get to choose another human being's death. That's not something you get to choose.
Bullshit. There are plenty of times that people get to choose the life and death of others. Politicians commanding soldiers into battle, judges deciding what punishment to hand down to the convicted, family members choosing to take loved ones off life support, people who refuse to donate body parts or fluids despite there being specific persons who need those donations to live. That last one is particularly salient, and it was well dramatized in the book and movie My Sister's Keeper, where a young girl who was conceived for the purpose of being a savior sibling, i.e. one that is brought to life for the purpose of being spare parts for a severely ill sibling, sues for the right to have control over her own body. What about that situation? Does a person have the right to retain all their body parts? This is the difficult terrain we step onto when, as in the case with Georgia's heartbeat bill, we define a life at the moment of conception not just as a person, but a legally recognized citizen. Thus, if one citizen is legally required to use their body to support the life of another citizen in one instance, why not another? If you can say that a fetus is a special case exemption to a bodily autonomy that you otherwise respect, then you are acknowledging correctly that a fetus is not a fully formed human being deserving of all the rights we attribute to a fully formed human. Now, I know that in saying that, many will respond, as Ben does elsewhere, that a birthed baby is not a fully formed human. Actually, it is. It has all of the biological components of a human being. Those components themselves are just continuing to grow, and growth in some capacity does not actually stop until the human being dies. And finally, to those deeply entrenched pro-lifers that are still watching, let me hold your hand and remind you again that, yes, while you are correct that shortly before birth the baby is fully formed inside the mother's womb, late-term abortions are only performed when they are deemed medically necessary. Expectant mothers are not aborting fully formed babies on a whim, no matter what nonsense you picked up from a Ben Garrison cartoon.
So, when is it okay to kill this? When is it okay to kill this? Is it okay to kill this thing at week 14, when the heart is pumping several quarts of blood through the body every day? How about week 15, when the baby has an adult's taste buds? How about month 4, when the bone marrow is beginning to form? How about that? Or how about weeks 9 and 10, when the baby's teeth are already beginning to form, its fingernails are already beginning to develop? We're talking about 2 months old, right? The baby can turn the head and frown. The baby can hiccup. Is that okay to kill? How about week 4? By the end of the week 4, the kid is already 10,000 times larger than the fertilized eggs was. There's already the beginnings of eyes and legs and hands. There are already brain waves detectable. Mouth and lips are present. Fingernails are forming. How about week 3? By the end of the 3rd week, the kid's backbone and spinal column and nervous system are forming. The liver and kidneys and intestines are beginning to take shape. How about day 22? The heart's already beating with the child's blood, which may be of a different blood type than the mother. So where in here exactly do you think it's okay to murder that kid because you have a personal convenience issue?
I will not answer that question directly because it is being asked in bad faith. This is a purely emotional argument intended not to elicit a reasoned response, but rather to rhetorically bully the recipient of the question into shame and submission. There are components of the human form, such as the heart, which we symbolically associate with emotional and spiritual dimensions of human existence. But the presence of these symbols does not mean that we are duty-bound to feel shame in lieu of a rational and logical argument. That Ben resorts to these tactics is again galling, considering that his viewers say things like, Clash Playa 1 week ago, "Sir, we've been hit with facts and logic. By whom? Ben Shapiro, sir, our left wing is down." Or Subhana Sarwar 1 week ago, "This guy is going to be hated for being a logical man. Still you go, man." Or Emily Hess 18 hours ago, all of these obviously being from the time that I collected them on the page. Emily Hess, quote, "I love how he uses logic and doesn't speak anything but the truth in a common-sense way," close quote. There is nothing factual or logical about what he's doing here. At every turn, he has ignored the facts and made wild emotional arguments based on wild distortions. That is not the Ben Shapiro that I respect.
Where do you think that you're right? And I love the glowing way she presents this. Here I am. I can't be a bad woman because I'm pregnant. I can't hate babies. I mean, here I am. I'm pregnant. Well, if you don't hate babies, or if you're not interested in killing them, then why are you in favor of people being allowed to kill them? Because it's not a matter of a woman's right to choose. A slave owner didn't get to choose to hold slaves.
Oh my God, you did not just pull out the slavery analogy. Look, I'll cut to the chase. The women are the slaves in this situation. They're the ones having to perform labor against their will to serve the needs of another human being. And if that human being, the fetus, is to be defined as a citizen with rights, then that citizen does not have the right to force another human being to do labor on their behalf. And the one being forced to do that labor has the right to kill their oppressor. The more you try to define a fetus into being something it's not, the more your argument closes in on itself.
Nazis didn't get to decide which Jews got to live. And don't give me the it's legal, therefore it's okay. Lots of things were legal. Lots of things in human history have been legal that were totally evil. Okay, it is evil to suggest, as Hillary Clinton does, that the minute before a baby is born, you should be able to drag it by the feet out of the mother, except for the head, stick a scissors in there, ram it into the baby's skull, rip the skull open, suck the brains out, crushing it, and then pull it out. Hillary believes that that's something you should be allowed to do.
The weasel word here is suggest. Obviously, Hillary did not actually say that. If she did, he'd play the clip of it. Hillary Clinton is more famous for saying that abortions should be safe, legal, and few, a far more considerate and compassionate position that will, I'm sure, go completely over the heads of Trump-era pro-lifers who have been brainwashed into thinking that Hillary Clinton is some sort of all-encompassing Voldemort-level evil, the likes of which the human race has never seen, and thank God dear leader Trump arrived to shepherd us through the valley of darkness, or whatever other lunacy you people picked up from Ben Garrison. Seriously, I know this is off topic, but do people actually laugh at Ben Garrison cartoons? Is this a sense of humor that large numbers of people actually have? Portraying Trump the way he does is like putting Tony Soprano in a Superman costume. Anyway, don't go down the suggest tunnel. Again, it's another weasel word by which we can make anything sound abhorrent. I mean, think about those cataract surgeries I mentioned earlier. Come on. Why does a doctor have a right to stick a vacuum cleaner in someone's eye? If you stuck a vacuum cleaner in someone's eye, you'd go to jail, so doctors shouldn't be allowed to do it. 12. On this we agree, and I think it is commendable of you to check religion at the door. You have not, however, used any science outside of a few cursory references to fetal development and the observation that a late-term pregnancy is likely to yield a viable baby, things I don't believe anyone is disputing on the pro-choice side of the argument.
When I talk about stuff I hate, this is a grave sin. It's a blot on the American Republic. It's a blot on the morality of the American people that we treat the killing of literally the most innocent among us. Literally the most innocent among us. We treat the killing of these human beings as nothing more than just an issue of convenience and choice and all the rest of it. It's just no more euphemisms, no more euphemisms. And I wish to God that Mike Pence would have said that instead of citing to the Bible, okay? I haven't cited the Bible one time because I don't think that I think the Bible is right, but I don't think the Bible is the important textbook here. I think what's important here is the science.
On this we agree, and I think it is commendable of you to check religion at the door. You have not, however, used any science outside of a few cursory references to fetal development and the observation that a late-term pregnancy is likely to yield a viable baby, things I don't believe anyone is disputing on the pro-choice side of the argument.
I think you're talking about the creation of a unique human life on day one, and you can see it, and you can see the growth, and if you're willing to point out to me where it is that this becomes a human as opposed to a ball of tissue, then let's hear it. Let's hear it. I've gotten tweets, by the way. I tweeted this out earlier, and somebody said, well, the brainwaves only start at week 20. So how about that? You know, do you think that people who are brain dead are alive? Well, people who are brain dead don't turn into not brain dead 3 weeks later. Would you kill somebody in a coma because they're brain dead, but you know they're not going to be brain dead in 4 weeks, in 10 weeks? Would you do that? Would you pull the plug on him knowing for a full-on fact that if you just wait a few weeks, that person's going to be fully functional again? Would you do that?
I was about to say this is pseudoscientific, but that's putting it far too lightly. This is really just completely false. People who are brain dead are considered legally dead, not in a coma. People in a coma are not brain dead. Your response to the original poster is therefore false, and I will not endeavor to refute it further.
And it's just it's truly incredible to me the way that we can blind ourselves to this. I remember when I was at the 2012 DNC, and I went to, you know, it was in Charlotte, and I walked past an exhibit, and it was a picture. It was the anti-abortion crowd, the pro-life crowd, and they were out there with these pictures of aborted babies. And I walked past, and I thought what most people from big cities thought. I thought, wow, how gauche. How gauche. I mean, those are ugly pictures. Should I really have to look at that in the public square? That's really ugly. And then I realized that that's probably how people treated pictures of slavery back in the 1850s. That's probably how people treated pictures of the Holocaust back in the 1940s.
If you are going to make a purely emotional argument to galvanize your emotion-driven base, whether that base is right or left of center, always remember to invoke U.S. slavery and the Holocaust, the only two tragedies in human history to which our modern-day idiocracy seems to have any deep-seated emotional connection or cognitive awareness. Here, I'll prove it. The situation in Flint, Michigan is not unlike the kind of impoverished conditions that led to the French Revolution. See? Didn't even get a tiny twang of guilt, did you? Now watch this. Flint, Michigan is like if Django Unchained and Schindler's List were the same movie. Aw, shit, you're stirred up now, aren't you?
The bottom line is, if it's that ugly, maybe you should do something about it instead of whining about how ugly it is. And it's not a matter of personal choice. Okay, I have a stake in whether my neighbor gets murdered, and I have a stake in whether my neighbor's baby gets murdered too.
You have a stake in whether or not your neighbor gets murdered because there is the potential that the murderer will come for you next. That is not the case with abortion. Also, abortion is not murder. Murder is defined as the illegal taking of another human life. Abortion is legal, therefore not murder. That is not meant to end the discussion of whether or not it is an acceptable practice, just pointing out that we shouldn't conflate terms. This is especially important when you have posts in the comments from Ben's viewers who, despite his insistence on not arguing his position in religious terms, nevertheless invoke Christian doctrine. For example, Saber, who writes, "Thou shalt not kill. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Enough said." Well, the commandment is not thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder. A very big and very significant difference. Also, the before I formed you in the womb, I knew you is irrelevant even in Christian theology. That's God speaking to Jeremiah about the purpose he had specifically for his life. The idea that this is an all-encompassing passage about the life of every human being is, like all matters related to the Bible, derived more from one's interpretation of the text than what is actually being said. You don't know the mind of God. Indeed, God might want to have a certain number of babies to be aborted. I'm not saying he does. I don't know, and neither do you. I want to do a separate video on Christianity and abortion, so I'll leave it there for now. But in closing, to Ben, you are better than this. I don't believe that you will change your position based on anything I say here, but perhaps you can realize when you're letting your emotions get the better of you, something that doesn't seem to happen when you're discussing other topics. If you don't, you're going to keep having upsets like your appearance on the BBC. Kind regards, Jordan.